Hello, everyone. Welcome to another discussion in the SF Masterworks reading group. Today, we're going to be discussing Lord of Light by Roger Zelazny. The SF Masterworks reading group is this group that meets, and a few others who, whenever they're able to join us, uh, who swipe books across the screen. That's our main attribute. And also, we read the SF Masterworks one every month in the order that they were published as Masterworks. So, not the original publication order, the Masterworks publication order by Golangs. Uh, the next three books, if you'd like to join us for any of them, are for March, it's going to be Fifth Head of Cerberus by Jean Wolfe. For April, Gateway by Frederick Pohl. And May is going to be The Rediscovery of Man by Corvina Smith. I think I have that correctly. But if not, I'll correct it next month. uh, we have the wonderful group of people who join us usually for the discussion. Susanna, would you like to start us off with introductions?
Hello, my name is Susana Imaginário. I am the author of Timelessness, and I run a YouTube channel called Den of the Weird.
Hi, I'm Jared. I run the Fantasy Thinker YouTube channel and also post an occasional blog on pagechewing.com.
Nice. My name's Chris Moore, and I run a YouTube channel as well. I post in the Patreon forum. I'm part of a podcast called Speculations with some of the lovely people on here as well. And yes, I think that's my lot as well.
Nice. So I think I'd like to start with a general question. I am super familiar with all the names in this book and all the gods. Some of it was confusing. Like I was telling Susanna earlier that we saw different people for Vishnu and Krishna, or different people for Rudra and Shiva. They're all like they're the same god, different aspects of them. So like some of that was confusing, and I had to keep reminding myself that these are these are people, not gods. But I'm curious how it read for you in terms of like the vast number of Hindu gods we meet on these pages.
Well, I know very little of Hindu mythology, so I was quite lost with all the names, and especially since every character seems to have 3 or 4 of them. And but I loved it because I was curious to learn more about it, and I loved the structure of the book. And if anyone read my stuff, they would understand why. I mean, I wish I would have read this before I wrote my own, because this is exactly the same sort of madness. The prose is different, but exactly the same sort of madness. And I was delighted to just be confused, and I can't wait to go and investigate all this, because now I want to know all about it. And I was really happy with this book.
Nice. Yeah. And I have read 3.5 of your books, and I like I was I was telling you earlier too that this feels a lot like your books with what you're trying to do with like technology and magic, except the technology is more recognizable in Susanna's books. But yeah, Chris, what did you think?
My first line in my notes, my extensive notes, and I mean, this is a complex book full of mythological and deity references, much of which is completely lost on me, which is why I started taking as much extensive notes as I did, because I found that it really, really helped in terms of writing down chapter by chapter for me to actually come to the next chapter and go, that person is also that person. Even before they actually tell me, you sort of know by the context of who they're talking to and how they're speaking to them that actually Siddhartha is exactly the same as Sam, is exactly the same as the Binder, for instance. And then when it got to later on and they started using the gods as roles rather than actual people, so when they replaced Shiva, etc., and Brahma, then it actually didn't matter by that stage, because I had sort of recorded it and sort of read it deeply enough to the point that I kind of forced myself to take stock of who was who, and therefore it never really appeared, which is it makes me wonder how, like, I've seen people read this in 2 days. If you don't know the mythology and read it in 2 days, I am not sure how you could follow it, because that definitely was not me. I had to kind of, it didn't read slowly, but read a bit, take stock. And then, as probably Susanna was talking about a little bit there, it prompts curiosity. It prompts you to do a quick Google and things. It prompts you to kind of go and look and see, actually, this person's come up again and again. Is this a real thing, or was this, was this an actual person
Mm,
within the mythology? And often that created another level of depth to the characters that wasn't even on the page, which was just great.
yeah, yeah. I did think though that with each aspect that was introduced, none of it relied on foreknowledge of what this god is or what this aspect is. I thought that there was a little tag somewhere that said this is the god of so and so. So you know what role I suppose that they're meant to play in the story. And then you also have this added depth. If you know the mythology, then I suppose you can read more into it. But I suppose it's possible potentially to do a surface level reading with just like even with just that. I feel like there's a lot that you can get out of the story. What about you, Jared?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was very interesting for me. I was a little familiar with Hindu mythology and Buddhism as well, because I've read a lot about I've recently completed a history of India
Mm,
book a while back, and so I was familiar with a lot of the terms and stuff like that. But even then, some of the some of the names and some of the aspects even can be kind of fluid at times,
mm,
even in history. So uh, and so it made complete sense that you had 6 or 7 names just for Sam,
mm,
and that
Brilliant.
tracks that tracks with actual historical stuff that there's a lot of names for the Buddha out there, and so it took a while to get into that, and there were some parts of the book where it was like, okay, I'm a little bit lost right now, but you just keep reading, and the prose is pleasant.
mm,
So it's kind of lyrical in a way and kind of pleasant to read, and so you get into the rhythm of reading it, and the names fall into place after a while. And you start figuring out who's who, and I really like how he put all that together, because it made it a pleasant read, even if you were confused about exactly what was happening. uh,
mm,
Mm.
you eventually got into it, and I have a feeling that if you went back and started reading this again, uh, you would get that feeling of, oh, okay, all right, I remember this from before, and now it makes a little more sense. But even then, I think you could still get a little bit lost in places,
yeah,
even on a reread you could, because there's a lot of, like you said, Vasha, there's a lot of little subtleties in there that he gives little hints along the way, and he gives little hints about um, identity,
mm,
um, and he also gives all those nifty little hints about technology too. That
yeah,
if you don't catch those, it's just a fantasy story. But if you catch them, it's
yeah,
also goes into science fiction. So it's
Yeah.
really neat how he did it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I
But,
can't wait to read it again. It's definitely a book that was meant to be reread,
mm,
which is the sort of book I love. And because I'm sure I missed loads, the little aside.
Yeah.
It
Oh yeah.
took me a while. I mean, I loved the start, very strong start. That
Mhm.
first paragraph is brilliant. And then it kind of, I was getting too confused. Think, what the hell is going on? I'm not sure about
mhm,
this. Yeah. And then it suddenly clicked. It's one of the books you have to persevere, and before you know it, once you have when you are in that wavelength, I don't know, that the mindset, then you start picking up in those character traits, and even in ah, so good. I'm gonna have to read it again. Proper
So,
immerse reading.
so
Yeah.
much of the chapter felt like there was some kind of lyrical setup, some sort of description, but just about in every chapter there was a couple of key conversations between two characters
mm,
mainly, and a lot of the ideas and a lot of the conversation, a lot of the joy that really came from those really lengthy conversations where they kind of poked at each other a lot of the time about ideologies and that kind of stuff, and about what a god should be doing, what a god shouldn't be doing. And by the time you'd got 2 chapters in, you were like, this is gonna be fine. Like there's a bit of exposition here to start for set the scene for where we are in the world, what's happening, and I had to get over the fact that every time I thought a character was dead, I was like, but they're not dead.
You can't kill the god of death.
I can't kill him. I can't kill him. I can't kill him. And then we find out that sometimes the cheated death and all the rest of it. So having reset the scene, but then to get to those character moments or those bits where the conversations were happening, and then going, right, get my pen ready to take notes. We're going again.
Yeah, and I love how they would just test themselves in this casual way. Let me see if I can try to kill him today. See how it goes. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much. It must have been really fun to write. And in the end, like you said, there's a lot of dialogue. Most of the book is dialogue. It's just them banter more than anything, just talking at it. And I love that. Just I could have used a little bit more dialogue tags. Sometimes I had to reread. Okay, who's talking now? It was, but yeah. I've read a couple of reviews where people complained that there was a lot of talking, and it's like, why are you complaining about this? This is great. It's all about talking.
But combine the dialogue talks with actually the different names that everybody had, and sometimes you weren't able to actually place somebody until like 3 pages into the conversation, even that it was Sam or that it was somebody else because of the way that they've been introduced, and even the one human character Robin here, even he gets a name change because he takes on Buddhism at the part, and you're like, what what is happening there?
Yeah. Oh yeah, the Sugata thread, right?
Riddles,
Yeah. I think the one, maybe I'm jumping too far ahead. Let's start with the first chapter. So before that, there's another general-ish question I have to the group. I read somewhere, it might have been a Goodreads review, that this was actually a short story, a set of short stories that have been stitched together to read as a novel. Did any of you pick up on that, or did it feel like that to you? Like each chapter, I found that out when I was just reading the first chapter, I think. So I could see how like each chapter is self-contained and could be a separate story, but did you get that impression? Like there's a bunch of stitched together, disconnected stories somehow?
I kind of. Oh, go ahead.
No, I mean it is a bit disjointed at parts. I mean the time jumps, but I figured that was intentional.
That's what I thought. Yeah, I thought it was intentional.
Yeah, and it might have been in the larger scheme of things. Right? Like short stories also serve as a way to serialize larger connecting threads, I suppose.
But I think it was something that I didn't know was happening initially. When you got to chapter 1, chapter 2, again, you're thinking one event's going to roll into another one, and then you've got that moment of, oh, this isn't just after he's been captured or something. This is a good bit after that. A lot of events have happened here in the interim, and once you got into the rhythm that was what was happening all the time, because it doesn't telegraph it anyway. It doesn't kind of timestamp it or anything to say, oh, a few moments later or whatever. But it wasn't like it was hard to read that, but it didn't take long for you to kind of work out, oh, right, okay, we're just we're a bit forward without it having to tell you. Like, again, that kind of idea of respecting the reader enough to kind of go, look, I don't need to signpost this completely. Just kind of do this.
That's a good point, Chris, because I think Zelazny in this case had a lot of respect for the reader. He let us figure a lot of stuff out on our own without slamming it over our heads, saying this is what it is. And there was a lot of those instances, especially when you went to the next chapter, and there was some cases it was like, decades later, like 50 years later or something like that, and you kind of had to figure that out. You kind of had to work that out through the dialogue and through what new circumstances were happening at that time, and I really appreciated that, actually.
Yeah, but there's a lot of people who don't like that.
True.
I love it. That's why I write the way I write. But I like having to put the puzzle together. I like to go and investigate. To go and I like not knowing things. Oh, my phone is ringing. Sorry, I'll shut up. Continue.
So I guess we could go chapter by chapter unless we need to jump back and forth to talk about any specific subject. So we start with this. I love the epigraphs, by the way. Like, I think the first chapter sort of sets the tone for the structure for what each chapter is going to look like. It doesn't change. There's the epigraph that tells us what is going to happen essentially in this chapter, or someone's interpretation, some future person's interpretation of the events that transpired here, it seems like. And then a quote. uh, it seems those seem to be translations from the Hindu text, but I don't know it. I could be wrong about that, but yeah. So I couldn't always tell how the two were related, but yeah, we can talk about that. But also, the events in the first chapter are Yama wields a prayer machine to bring Siddhartha back in his body, and then things happen. Let's discuss.
Hmm.
Yeah. Uh, well, they seem to have this these mechanisms to bring consciousness back into a body, and it seems to relate specifically to these these first people, um, who now know themselves as gods. And it wasn't really clear. It wasn't very clear when I was first reading the first chapter that that's exactly what they were doing. Um, so I was kind of in a little bit of state of confusion during that first chapter, and I figured it out later, but I was like, okay, what's going on here? And so that the first chapter, that's what I got out of it, is that there is that's he was kind of explaining the setup of what these people do. These people want to be gods who have who are wielding technology with that's godlike power, basically.
Hmm.
Um which is hilarious. I think there was even like later on in the book there was even like kind of it kind of it seemed like he was hinting at the power of these gods was is equivalent to like the power of some like atomic energy or something like that,
Hmm.
in our world today. And but that's just kind of what the setup was to me, uh to start out with.
Yeah, it's funny because as much as I have lots of notes for other chapters, I have just for the first chapter that we're presented that the gods are sort of omniscient in the world. They could take on any form. They could be animal. They could be humanoid. They could be anything. They basically decide on what way that they present themselves to each other, which I think is a theme that comes up in the next couple of chapters as well. This idea that the form that they present to other people is very important to them, regardless of their what's happened to them. They've reached this other place as gods, install themselves as gods, but actually how they show themselves to each other and their past relationships. Like because nobody really dies, you kind of see the same people again and again.
Yeah.
Um, it's something there, but there's an awful lot of setup, but there's an awful lot happening in the first kind of set. Other than we get introduced to a few characters like Tack, etc., that kind of stuff. The archivist. So.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the idea of how their attributes, their special talents would eventually come through. Um, Even though they change the body would eventually start to resemble what they really
Hmm.
were, and how the powers would manifest. That's yeah, amazing, because that helped us recognize who the character was,
Hmm.
just those little hints. Once you pick up on that, because it wasn't explained at the beginning, there's something we learned later on, and it was like, oh yeah, I'm picking up on this, and yeah.
Yeah. I love the, what's the right word to use? Is it symbolism, allegory, metaphor of
All of
Yama,
them.
of
No worries.
Yama, the god of death, being the one who made weapons, more and more powerful weapons that help kill and destroy the planet. I guess like you're bringing about death. So he's the god of death. I really, it wasn't immediately obvious to me like how what a genius move that was, but I appreciated it a lot more towards the ends of the book.
Yeah. Plus, at the very, very start, the very first thing we're done is introduced to this our main character, who
Mm,
happens to be Sam, and
Sam.
this phrase that appears constantly throughout the book. His followers called him Mahasamatman, and said he was a god. He preferred to drop the Maha and the Atman, however, and called himself Sam. He never claimed to be a god, but then he never claimed not to be a god, which is used numerous times throughout the text.
Yeah.
And we go.
Yeah, and
Um,
that kind of relates to Buddhism in a way, because Buddha's not really a god, but a lot of people worship him in a godlike way sometimes, and so it straddles that mid between that Sam was actually explaining, and it's pretty brilliant that way.
Yeah. And in much later chapter, there is this discussion of what a god is. I think it's Yama.
Oh, I have it marked. I loved it.
It's folded, written on, ripped out. What way have you marked it?
Folded,
Susanna?
written on.
A dagger through it? No.
Page 161.
But then you can't see the words.
In blood.
Just a highlighter with red.
161. There we go. It falls open.
161. Yes.
Godhood is more than a name. That part.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just beautiful.
Yeah.
Being a god is being able to recognize within oneself these things that are important, and then to strike the single note that brings them into alignment with everything else that exists. So, like, basically, it's like you have to have the audacity to think that you're a god, and then you're a god.
Yeah, I love when he goes, being a god is the quality of being able to be yourself to such an extent that your passions correspond with the forces of the universe. This is exactly my sort of madness for time. I'm sorry. But it did it so much better. I'm kind of jealous.
Second edition, Susanna. That's what you go for.
Edition.
Yeah. But the thing about the god and their definition of the god actually, again, is another one of those things that I felt popped up an awful lot of times. They do not, or they represent godhood and the things that they do in not doing godlike things, if that makes sense. So it's almost like being a god. They are bored. They have been reborn and done this an awful lot of time, and all they can find to do is mess and kind of tinker and play and create like mankind or whatever as a toy. And even their interrelationships, playing with each other to kind of devilment, just to alleviate the boredom of kind of living forever for themselves. And I thought that whole thing was like eternally fascinating, especially when you contrast with what Sam was actually trying to do to change the whole system and why do it. And because we then support Sam as the reader quite clearly, as being, our hero in a lot of ways. Even though he's a trickster, he's a character full of devilment. You couldn't trust a thing that he does. Yet,
exactly.
We're on his side.
He's all preaching, in favor of humanity and development and all that. And at the end of this long explanation of what a god is, I thought it was brilliant. And then the first thing he says is, so they play that on their fascist banjos, eh? So after reading, I was delighted, and then boom, just drops it there. And you just realize, okay, I guess it could be seen that way, but what you're doing is not exactly that different. He's just trying to impose his will on the world. It's just that his will is not the same will as the others.
Yeah, right in the second chapter, the beginning of the second chapter, we get that sense that Sam's attempting to do something different, because he says that he's going to stop attending the old council meetings. He stopped attending them, a century ago, because they were lengthy sessions calculated to postpone decision making, and I thought that was brilliant. And of course, whoever he was talking to there was accusing him of being the accelerationist, and I love that term. That was just brilliant. And so he was like, no, I'm just curious, so it's just the way he was going about his revolution, so to speak, was just it was like casual and yet
Mm,
subtle and insidious at the same time, and it was
Hmm.
just it made it so so it had a there was that humor to it that just made you
Yeah.
want to keep reading and just find out what this guy is going to come up with next.
mm. maybe maybe it was the fact that each chapter was sort of self-contained and whatnot, but there's this distance to this character that makes it feel like what you said, Jared, that what he's going about is also casual. Like, yeah, he's trying to it becomes apparent about chapter 5 that he's uh trying to bring about a revolution, change the way things are, and stop oppression, uh the way he sees it. And well, like the gods have their reasons. They seem to be selfish reasons for not sharing their technology with everyone else. But and they have this messed up promotion system of rebirth and changing your caste and so on. Chris, do you want to
I
interject?
was going to say, Justin, that they have the reasons, but it's based on the idea that a cataclysmic event has happened in their old world, and
Mm,
technology was the ruination of the thing. So they are trying to
Yeah.
prevent that happening again, but yet they say that they are just going to make sure that things happen naturally.
mm,
But then Sam's point is, and this is where he kind of tries to shine a light on them to say, but you are erasing natural advancements. The printing press has
Yeah,
been
mm.
invented numerous times here. And actually, I have to
I
say,
love that.
by the time we get to chapter 6 and they're talking about the toilet, I mean that's just bloody hilarious. Like
Yeah.
that was
I
properly
know.
hilarious.
It's like, uh-oh, somebody invented a bicycle. The world's going to go to hell.
Yeah.
I was like, oh,
Oh
so funny.
god! But that whole conversation between Sam and Brahma, I think, again, is incredibly illuminating because again, these are two characters that have known each other for centuries, millennia, whatever you want to
Yeah.
do, and yet when Brahma's getting ready to meet Sam, he dresses himself up in the most extravagant jewels and kind of this kind of show of this is who I am. I'm important. I'm more important than you. And so the kind of levels between these two people is shown to be that Sam's sort of oppressed, even though he's also a god,
Mm,
which it's funny how that all plays out actually further down the line, about
yeah.
how they
Yeah.
redress that balance and how he messes with that whole natural order.
Mhm.
Yeah. And the Brahma thread was also interesting because in the second chapter, when uh, to your point about the gods being bored, and also I guess just the subtle bits of world building there, if you will. There's apparently Brahma used to be female and now has a male body and wants to
Mhm.
be admired for their physicality and not for being a god. So uh, Brahma just wants to be appreciated for his body.
Don't we all? Don't we all?
Yeah.
Deep down.
So I just made myself this muscular body. I didn't do anything to work for it, but now these 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 women are dying for me, but not because I look muscular, but because I'm a god.
No, it's interesting that and then she or he was complaining that the women in the harem, they weren't paying attention, and I was like, well, if you were a woman, you should have known what women do pay attention to. Why would you chose that body? And it was, I imagined something, like bodybuilder, but still very effeminate.
Mm.
So yeah, that would not work.
Yeah, I thought that was hilarious, but also just I think with that bit of exposition, if you will, um, he showed us what the cycles of body can do, that the consciousness is fluid and it can go into any body, and maybe it's you're not like super tied to that individual body. But and to your point, Jared, about the accelerationist movement, they they're never explicitly explained as this is what it is, except in that one paragraph where Doc talks to another person. I forget her name, but is it Maya? Yeah, I think Tak explains to Maya what the accelerationist movement is, but you understand it from context much before that,
Yeah.
which is also, I think, really well done. Like the whole trusting the reader aspect of it. Yeah.
But also I went down such a YouTube hole with accelerationism. Like, I read a post upon Reddit post upon Reddit post. Then I found a Guardian article, which I'll actually have to link to everybody, that goes in about how the actual advent of modern accelerationism started from this book. This book started that entire conversation. I was like, what? Shut the front door. Because I think I talked about when we were reading this with Jared a little bit, basically saying like it's not very scientific at all. Like there's barely any sci-fi.
Oh, yeah.
It's very high fantasy in a lot of ways. But in terms of ideas and the things that it was doing, it's probably the most sci-fi book in terms of like taking real, like creating a new mode of thinking and then projecting that out in fictional form to then people to go ahead and look and see actually, oh, that's what's happening now, and you can take the lessons that are in here. Like, I mean, the acceleration of this movement is basically creating AI, and the fact that everybody's sort of embracing AI, the capital world's embracing AI, but it actually could end up being the death of it because that's how accelerationism kind of works and thinks. And just like going, as with loads of these books, you're going, my head has just exploded. That somebody in 1967 had this in a couple of pages of a book, and then it's become this whole other thing to explain what's happening in society. Like 80 years later, and it's like, oh, you know, whatever.
And how you went about it? Like so far, books we've read with great ideas, and they were all kind of. Even The Stars, My Destination, which was a bit out there, but it was always presented in a kind of serious way, very scientific, and it just ran with it. It's just, it made it fun. Again, some people might disagree, but it was very lighthearted. You only when you actually stop and, if you stop each day and think about it and realize, oh, there's a lot more in here than just banter between old friends, and that was genius. Yes.
Yeah, I agree. I love the description of the entrance to hell. What do they call it here? Hellwell.
How well,
Where it
yes.
says there's a sign on it that says "Go away." This is not the place to be. If you try to enter here, you will fail and be cursed. If you somehow succeed, then don't complain that you entered unwarned, nor bother us with your deathbed prayers. Signed, the gods. That was I like laughed out loud when I read that.
It's so playful. But they're just like bored children. Like, honestly, it's that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
We'll have to make a sign. I'll make the sign. Leave it with me. I'll write the sign. And then they go put it up. It says, right, the sign's done, guys. What's next? Print and press and vent it, get rid of it. I'll do that.
So funny.
Yeah.
And and of course the demons of hell are like these elementals, and just the way that the head elemental, I forget his name,
Taraka, yeah.
yeah. The way every time he saw a god, he's like, I can take him.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Like,
Like, dude.
It's like that kind of thing. And somebody else said, little Jiminy Cricket. There's really serious conversations happening with track in the background, and he's like zoning it all out, going, "Fire, eh? I mean, it's a challenge."
oh, that's real light. Oh, that's yeah. I can
take it. Consumed by this idea, this macho kind of idea of like, I've got to prove that I'm stronger than everybody else.
Yeah.
Let's so much of that. Like, it's like, for what appears in the surface to be like a super serious take on this like epic high fantasy and all the rest of it, there's just lots of little bits of like poking fun at itself, which I think just makes it a lot of fun.
Yeah. Like, even in the first chapter, Tak wonders, they all wonder where the heck Siddhartha or Sam is getting up to every evening when he doesn't come back for days at a time. Tak follows him, and it turns out he's gambling with a bunch of demons.
Regular.
Yeah.
Of all the things you could be doing.
Losing money. Double down. Yeah. Like even the stupid stuff, like the stuff that's written very, very clearly, when Tax turned into an ape and to be an ape for eternity, and then the next chapter somebody's talking to him and they goes, "Why are you still deciding to be an ape?" And I said, "Oh, I kind of fancy it." And it's like this very decreed kind of thing, and he's like, "Oh, I'll not be an ape next time. I'll be fine."
And he's like, "Well, look what I can do,"
I can spy on me. He's like, it gives me superpowers. It's really
I could go branch to branch.
so much humor in it. It's really, really unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
man.
Oh god.
So-
So actually, back in topic, I was going to say the sequence where Sam is getting his new body. So, and he's a bit wary of trusting anybody, and so he creates the kind of the thing, and then finds out the body gets brought back to him, and he says, "Oh, they were actually going to put me in a real body," and then it turns out the person was epileptic. And he's like, "I knew it." But it goes to show how smart Sam was. Like that's one of the very clearest indications that he actually is playing chess while everybody else is playing drafts, kind of thing, playing checkers. That he's kind of a step ahead of everybody at all times, which is shown again and again and again throughout the whole book.
So I don't know if you guys read the at the end the little note by George R. R. Martin about that's about the epilepsy that scene. I can't pronounce the word now. So and the pun in the scene, which I completely missed, and I was like, "What pun? What pun?" And then I had to go and search it, and I was like, "Oh yeah."
What
And
pun?
apparently that he wrote the book just to put in that.
He thought of the
in,
pun,
like,
and then he decided to write the book.
oh, wow, there's a little bit more than that, but it's a very good pun. You guys got.
I don't
Should I
want to
spoil
misquote it, so I'm just going to look at. Yes, there it is. I found it. Yeah. You go for it, Susanna, since you brought it up.
I missed it. I missed
the
it,
feet
so-
hit the shan.
Oh,
Oh.
Then the fit hit the shan. It's so good.
And
Again,
I'm
more
like, okay,
absolutely.
how many more I missed? I need to go and check.
yeah. I wouldn't doubt if there was quite a bit.
Fit hit the shan. And the whole mythology, Hindu mythology, and all the rest of it goes right. We'll write this book around it.
In the context of that scene, yeah, that was exactly what happened. It's just, I think he spells it all out in just very weird ways.
But it does make me wonder, because apparently Zelazny was asked and offered a lot of money to write a sequel to this for many, many years, and he flat out refused to do it. And I can sort of see why, because it's sort of perfect in its own little way. Like, what else do you do that's not more of the same? If you know what I mean, where do you actually take it? And you have this piece of art that's just magnificent in its own way that begs to be reread, like we've all kind of said. So it can be its own thing, which is amazing.
Yeah. That this I mean that need for sequel that some people have, to me, it might lessen it if it might lessen this book if there's a sequel to it. I mean, you could probably say that about a lot of stuff that did have a successful sequel too, but but I think in this case this is quite unique. I've never read anything like this, and I wouldn't want to see somebody try to just imitate this again in a different form. Like, what would you do? It just, to me, it doesn't seem like something that's viable with this book.
But it potentially changes the whole conversation from being about just this, what's in these pages, to being about a series then, which you have to got ups and downs. Like, people can't talk about a Game of Thrones TV series anymore without talking about, the end of that, for instance.
Yeah.
That is part of that whole conversation. People can't have the conversation just about the good parts. It has to be about the whole thing. So, yeah.
And
I mean,
there was one, sorry, go ahead, Susanna.
Oh, there's definitely material to write, to keep writing. That's the saying when you write about mythology, you never run out of things to write about it. But it would diminish the book, I think. Even if it was longer than it is, it would start, it would be too much. I think it's exactly the right length. Because if it was like 600 pages of this, it'd probably be like, okay, by the fifth other page, you'll be like, I'm done. I don't need to know anymore. So yeah, I think it was right to just leave it as it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's it, I mean the basic plot of the that led up to the battle at the end. Um, it's not very plot focused. It has that basic plot,
Yeah.
but the rest of it is that exploration of this society, this technological society, acting as a mythological society, and and that was the point of it, really, and the absurdity of it all,
Mm.
Hmm.
is really the focus, and so I think trying to like you said, expanding it into a 600-page mega novel, it wouldn't have worked. It wouldn't have been the same. It wouldn't have had that same absurd impact that it does.
Hmm.
But it's also sort of like completely genius. Taking this mythological deidal society, which was Hinduism, where people worshipped gods. How do you fuss and break with that down? You create a new religion, i.e., Buddhism, that doesn't have a figurehead of a god, but is all about reaching enlightenment or various stages of enlightenment, which is not something that any of them can control. And only having one person in the entire book get there, and he offers himself up to be killed. It's in this kind of macho kind of thing. I could take him, but he knows he's going to die kind of thing. But, the whole thing's like phenomenally smart, and why that was a threat to the gods, and why they felt that this had to be
Yeah.
pushed down and suppressed in whatever way that they could.
Yeah, and he didn't
Hmm.
even completely get there.
Yeah.
He said, "Oh, I just made that stuff up," and other people followed it.
Yeah.
You
Mm.
know, so
Yeah.
there's more irony on irony there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It almost felt like he was. It. I read envy into the initial interaction between him and Sugata when Sugata is almost teaching him at this point. But I think maybe it's just admiration that
Mm.
you got to where I couldn't. Uh, but I did want to say on the subject of expanding the scope of the book that it is, I agree that it is perfect as it is, but there's one thing that I thought it could have maybe benefited a bit from, but I don't know how you would add it without really maybe changing the whole thing. Is we have these gods, all of them, including Sam, who think they know what is good for the people. And we never see any of the people and what their daily life is, at least as far as chapter 6. We don't, and I doubt that chapter 7 changes that drastically. So I don't. I think that would have been an interesting perspective about like what it is that the people want, how happy are they or not, and and I think that would have helped me understand whether Sam is just an additional person. Like what I was saying earlier, that maybe I didn't finish, was that Sam also, the gods seem to be bored, like the other gods, quote unquote, are bored, so they're doing these random like playing, using the people on the planet as a plaything. But is Sam also the same? Is he also just bored and wants to bring about revolution for the sake of it, or is he actually going to help people with whatever he does? We don't know that because we don't know anything about what the people actually want. And maybe the point is it doesn't matter. Maybe the larger point is, if you have these entities who are making decisions for the larger collective, let's analyze whether that makes sense uh, in and of itself. But um, yeah, that was, I felt like a bit of a missing piece for me.
Yeah.
Well, the people wanted toilets at some point. It was quite a long. It was one of the first things they wanted.
Toilets and
Makes
trashy
sense.
magazines. That's all they
Yeah,
wanted.
pretty much.
Bicycles,
But it,
bicycles.
Bicycles. Yeah.
bicycles, yeah. And I did get the impression that he was just trying to mess with the other gods to this, not so much help the people, but dismantle the whole pantheon, that whole system. Let the people help themselves, because the gods weren't helping; they were hindering them. So it just pretty much let them figure things out. It wasn't set up to help.
Yeah,
Mm,
I think that was a point of the accelerationist movement,
Hmm.
was to let the people help themselves. because the gods weren't helping them; they were just doing their own thing. Well, it's kind of interesting because the gods do mention they're raising the armies and stuff from the people, and they
Mm-hmm.
mention the various cities that they're going to lose, but they mention them more like chess pieces than they do, you know, caring about whether the cities survive or not. And so, like, yeah, like you said, they're just using them. They're using everything. They're using it's all
Mm-hmm.
a big game. And yeah, you're right. You don't really get that
Mm-hmm.
that peasant
Yeah,
proletariat.
but it's quite a vicious game because at some point we learned that the people are their descendants because throughout the years and the different bodies they just kept procreating, so they're actually their great grandsons, and even that wasn't enough to make them care.
Mm.
That was it was like wow. If that's not godlike, I don't know what is.
But like all of Sam's actions in the first couple of chapters are about showing why the system is broken. For instance,
Mhm.
that the fact that these deities are bored, that they sort of have caught up in their own thing. Even the bit about them using the epileptic body. I mean,
Mm.
he was gods. They were just doing that to be spiteful. I mean, it was
Mhm.
showing them as being spiteful gods and being judgmental and kind of not really caring. And I think if you were genuinely bored, you would think that there'd be more than one of them going, well, actually, it does happen because Yama comes to that realization later on to basically say, our time is done here. We aren't really doing anything with this time. We're not doing anything with these powers
Mm.
other than squabbling and kind of picking fun with each other and kind of turning him into an ape and there's not really nothing happening. There's time for something else. And then the idea of accelerationism is just we need to speed up this process in some way. So whatever's next gets the chance to come next, whether it's Buddhism or whatever else it is.
Yeah. If you're not helping speed it up, at least stop interfering when
Yeah.
it happens, right? Yeah.
Mm.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it is also that there was also a genuine concern too that they wouldn't be reincarnated properly, and that they could end up as an actual ape or something, or a mouse or whatever.
Mm.
Mhm.
There was concerns about that. So I wonder if I'm not sure. I don't remember exactly how much that played in, because they had those masters of karma,
Mhm.
um, that they had to be concerned about as well. And I think didn't one of the gods like attack that temple or something that had the masters in it?
Mm. It was Sam, wasn't it?
It was Sam.
After,
Yeah,
yeah, after he got the bad tunnel that they were going to give him the epileptic body.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So there
That's
were
great.
yeah, there were some threats to their existence. Not not
Yeah.
uh,
Mhm.
not just they weren't playing with a you know a, just a play.
Mm.
But again, great humor in that scene where Sam does do the standoff and basically starts wrecking the gardens as if that's actually important. I want to speak to somebody. Oh, he's not here. Right, I'm just going to start wrecking the place, and then all of a sudden that was important enough for them to go right. Okay, they're here. And fraternal beings or otherwise, that just seems a bit strange.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they had very basic concerns. I don't think I quite understood how the karma thing worked, but I got the impression that they weren't so much worried about dying or going to just being, uh, incorporeal. They didn't want to be, in a base body or an animal body. They didn't want to go back to being just human. They were more concerned with the loss of power than the loss of life, because they took their
Mm.
life for granted. Their souls were already eternal somehow. They just keep being transferred. He was, spending 50 years as a horse or buffalo or whatever. That such an inconvenience.
Yeah.
Couldn't mess with that.
And you can't end it early because suicide counts against you. So
Yeah, exactly.
the I didn't fully understand what they kept referring to real death. I Does that mean you don't get a body or you don't get reincarnated anymore? What was that? And where do you go if that happens? Because they've sort of established that consciousness is some like energy with some form in it, like especially with the rakashas. Um, yeah, I
So
think yeah.
was it Brahma who actually made that decision, which is why he was killed first? And there was that period that he couldn't bring himself back then. You know, when he was poisoned, and they said actually life will end if we don't replace Brahma immediately. It
Mm,
seems like Brahma's role was in the reincarnation system, and so he was actually killed. And was it Shiva was the other one? The two of them were killed, and they were killed properly because they had
Mhm.
nobody in place at that stage to
mm,
bring the bodies back or deactivate
Right.
the karma system. And so they had to be replaced then with Kali and whoever else, you know,
Yeah,
including
mm,
and that was interesting because they could. It seemed like that was not just switching bodies to be the same god. There was actually some switching of roles going on
yes.
Mhm, mhm,
when they needed a role replacement rather than replacing
mhm.
a god. And this. So it's interesting how they could do that.
mm.
But again,
Because oth- because
Kali
otherwise
and
the
Yama
universe would be
just
out of
got married.
balance.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
she decides to
and
change
then
sex, and he's like, I'm switching the other team, guys. That's me out. My wife's now my husband. And, you sure you want to do this? The choice has been made. Okay. Right. I'm switching the other team, guys. And that brings the whole system down. Like, it's, again, hilarious.
he spent so long trying to marry her or to seduce her, and then just married, can't change bodies. Oh no,
Yep.
that's it.
Says like, I'm gonna bring fire to the heavens. Going to Sam now. You switch teams, I can switch teams too.
That's a wrathful husband. Like, you don't want to piss off reasons to not marry the god of death, I suppose, 101.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Even if you're a god of death yourself.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It was a perfect couple.
But they explain one of their reasons why the gods don't want to give their knowledge and their power to the regular people, and they say that because they're worried about once they do that, then everybody would be a god, and the result that there would no longer be gods, only men, and they in doing so they would destroy their simple faith and remove all basis for their hoping things will be better, which is a very selfish reasoning, really, when you think about it. But that is the reason for the opposition to accelerationists, and it's just that that's how the gods look at it, and it's just those kind of little philosophical statements that he brings out every once in a while is the things that make you think, and as you're laughing around the rest of the
Yeah.
rest of the book.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, they had the point. I mean, things would get better for a while, but then what would happen when everyone was a god? If just with a handful of them, the amount of trouble they were having, if it was the entire
Yeah.
population,
It-
yeah.
it's probably what it's probably what led to past
Hmm.
apocalypses, basically.
Yeah.
Uh,
Hmm.
so that's something they had to think about.
Yeah, but also this notion that that's very self-serving, no? That they lose hope. They what was it again? That they lose the ability to hope for anything because they're all gods. And that's essentially saying you don't have the ability to worship anymore because like who will you pray to? But yeah, that I found myself resisting that statement because like you don't you're assuming that this is the only way people get hope and that's just self-serving because you want to be worshipped for whatever reason, like you're bored. But um
Yeah, it's definitely disingenuous, and it's
Hmm. It's
but
very
that's
selfish. Yeah.
that's part of the whole part of their existence, and
mm,
it's part of the charm of the book.
yeah,
But
yeah,
I also think it's sort of like it would be nice to have somebody that was devout Hindu or otherwise that does believe in reincarnation and the fact that your soul will be reborn depending on your karma in this life. Because I suppose I was trying to think of it in terms of the way that I was brought up in religion and this idea of heaven and hell. The idea of eternal damnation for Catholicism is the end of the road for you as well. And again, a lot of people, the fear of that drives people's life. There is a sort of idea that you're living a good life so that you can get into heaven at the end of the day. It's in
Mm.
much the same way as you scare kids with the coal from Santa Claus. You know,
Mm.
this is your chance. I'm phoning him. I'm phoning him to let him know that you've been bad, and that's your chance gone. So it sort of is definite in some religions, and it's the promise of the next life or eternal life that you wouldn't actually die in that case. So maybe if you do take that away, because the belief system's so strong that it does become everything else becomes unimportant at that stage. You know, I don't know. That'd be
Oh,
interesting to know
is
from
the
somebody.
belief system sorry, go ahead, Susanna.
It's not so much the worshiping. I think it's the aspiration of being more than God, of the ambition of improving yourself. What do you do when you are as improved as you will ever be? Then
Mm. But it's a
you
caste thing, right?
you
It's
become.
not. It's not. Uh, it's not a power thing. It's a caste thing. Whatever power they have, it's from wielding weapons. Apparently, like even Agni has a
Mhm,
device
true.
to
That's right.
wield fire. So there, if you take away their weapons, they're all exactly the same as the human. So yeah, they don't. They get to live forever, and they get different bodies based on like whatever uh karma, sure, but that argument maybe it's an admission then inadvertent admission, but that these gods have nothing to hope for because they don't know what to do next. But yeah, like it I didn't think that the two were tied, but that's a good point that if you worship your gods and you collect your prayer slugs, then you have something to look forward to for the next life. Versus, yeah, it's all the same. You can get whatever body you want. You can figure it out. Maybe there's a difference there on like what you might strive for. But the concept of nirvana was briefly touched upon in the first epigraph. I don't know if they built upon it more in chapter 7 because I don't think they elaborated throughout the rest of the book what nirvana meant versus just reincarnation. Like it, you don't reincarnate anymore with nirvana, but what did that look like in this world? Did we find out?
I don't remember much about it,
Yeah.
at least
No,
not on any of the marked pages.
because again, Brahma and Shiva are just gone. Those versions of them are they have been killed essentially by
Mm,
Sam.
yeah.
Yeah. And interestingly, there was another god. I don't remember her name,
Oh,
but she took on. She had the zombies, the one in
Mm,
charge of the zombies.
Niriti or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and she took on, the Christian aspect, and she
Mm,
was delving into that. And so it's interesting that he mentioned, because he also mentioned some of the Muslim stuff at in
Mm.
that during the the second half of the book here,
mm,
and the Christian stuff, and he started to bring in these other ideologies that some of the gods were starting to associate themselves with and be different versions of, like either angels or what have you, um as far as changing the names, just the way that all religions morph into others, so
mm,
it was very interesting how that started to come about towards the end of the book, like there was some sort of change going on.
mm,
Mm.
And is very clever because he started introducing those changes as a culmination of that final battle.
mm,
And and so you start to wonder, okay, well, what's the future going to look like with these new aspects of ideologies and gods in
mm.
this weird science fiction world that we're on
Yeah.
here. Because like another question I had was, what are the Rakashas? Are they like a
So
Yeah.
alien species?
they were the I was going to explain what Rakshasas are in Hinduism, but they're just the original people of this planet.
People of the planet. That's
Yeah.
right. Okay.
So these guys
Okay.
invaded, locked them up, and called them demons. And
Yeah.
there was a nice line there where the Rakasha says, "You, to us, you are the demons
Yeah.
because you
Hmm.
invaded our home planet."
It's Am Legend, isn't it? You know, it's very much that idea. It's a borrow
Yeah,
Yeah.
things
yeah,
from you.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah.
yeah.
But uh, I'm going to jump back here. But when Taraka inhabits Sam's body, and he discovers the concept of guilt, and because he can't
Mm,
work out why he's feeling weird and all that other stuff.
Hmm.
Again, that exploration of that as a because again, guilt is linked to worship as well, which is a thing that obviously Taraka and the Rakasha have not sort of encountered, if you know what I mean, in terms of these deities. And they got a sense of that at that stage, and he was like, I don't like it.
yeah.
I don't like it. I'm going here. And Sam explains to him actually, but once it's like almost like original Cinderella, once you've been open to it and experienced it, you don't get to turn it off again. It is a very concept of being man and worshiping and doing all those things. And I thought there's another like a massively big idea in here that's just explored within the concept of somebody taking it over. And then they use it obviously in terms of how Sam is able to escape later on and do all of that other stuff. Because when Brahma and Shiva are killed, we know it's Sam, but as far as
Mm,
we know, he's dead. But we're
yeah.
like, how is it Sam? We know it's Sam, but how did he do it? And it creates that mystery and stuff. So that whole sequence, oh, it was so delicious. I just like this eating this book up. This is so good.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna go in on just a wild speculation here, since we're talking for an hour.
Nice.
Because the thing that got me hooked on the book, because it started well, and I was like, oh, I'm not sure. So Sam, because he feels guilt, and is all about destabilizing, saying maybe helping the people, maybe not. He's kind of a trickster. Um, and there's a bit at the beginning when he's a prince and he goes and talks to the old man that I forgot his name and I can't find it. And he says, it's a long way to Tipperary. And that was what hooked me, because suddenly I was like, okay, this is going to get very weird. So even though if everything is kind of based in the Hindu mythology, I kind of had the idea that maybe it was Catholic. That's why that sense of guilt and responsibility and
Yeah.
help others and compassion and etc. That it was ingrained in his attribute. Let's put it this way,
Mm,
and that's what was clashing with many of the other gods.
mm,
Yeah.
Hmm.
And
Definitely could be a
yeah,
thing. Yeah.
yeah. It's infused in there subtly, and the
Mhm.
the and you get a sense that all this stuff has played out before. Like
Mhm.
yeah.
this is not new. This has been repeated, even when
Mhm.
like the at the end there when um Nariti was talking to her general there and said escort this man. I think it was Ganesh, escort this man to where he needs to be or whatever, and release him unharmed. And the general asked her, "Would you trust this one?" And she says, "Yeah, but I'll give him his silver afterwards." And that was a
Yeah.
direct
Mhm. Mhm.
direct
Yeah.
reference to, of course, to Judas,
Just
and
described,
so
yeah.
and so it was all in there. It was all infused in there subtly, and he's just like, okay, I give him his, this has happened before, and
Yeah.
all this stuff has happened before, and I just love that cyclical sense that was going on here, because that's how a lot of mythologies are. They're cycling like
Yeah.
that,
They
and
Mm,
clash and then they evolve,
yeah,
and yeah.
you have your Ragnarok, it starts
Mhm.
over, and
Mhm.
that's how it goes,
It's the Matrix. It's through the time. It's all of it's all of those stories. I had another large note about again talking about the topic of reincarnation, and I'd completely forgotten this until I read it there. Do you remember Sam runs into his daughter? So Sam runs into his daughter, and they have a conversation about the fallacy of reincarnation. Because she says, "Do you not know I'm your father?" And she says, "No, but you've changed bodies so many times, and every
mm,
time you're
Mm.
reborn, you become a slightly different person. So you aren't my father.
mm,
Yeah,
You
yeah.
are an
yeah.
ideal. Your legacy is a lot of generations ago, so she had no connection to him on
Mm.
a level in terms of like passing down kind of responsibility or otherwise, and it was very much no.
Yeah.
These two things are different, and again, another really big idea wrapped up in a conversation between two people.
Yeah.
That it's like, right, okay,
Yeah.
this is the idea of divinity as a tool rather than a kind of
Well,
like parenting
yeah.
as we know it.
That's a big idea both on the god divinity side, but also on the science fiction side.
Yeah.
Like if you could
Mm-hmm.
transfer your consciousness to different bodies on a science fiction type manner, would that also have that? Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's huge.
I think. Sorry. Go ahead. Go
I was going to say, especially if you could transfer yourself into like a beautiful body, like that would no doubt change you in no ways. You'd walk around with your shirt off, whereas me now, and never doing that, you know. But if I could just get a new body, that might change everything about me. And I think that's part of what the daughter was talking about. Is the fact that actually every new body that they go into changes them to a certain
Yeah.
aspect
ahead.
or feeling, and changes
Yeah,
them a bit further away. Cool idea.
Mm. And
makes
I
sense.
think the chapter with Tak and Maya, I think that's the conversation, right? That was pretty expositionary in that it also had this conversation about Tak reveals that he is Sam's son, and he has this attachment to him for some reason, and that's why he chooses to help him, even though apparently he has no ideological similarities with him. He just is attached to this fact that he is the son of this great man who's well known, and and in that conversation they talk about what it means, what parenthood means, and I didn't notice the bit that you were talking about, Chris. Maybe it comes after the point where I left off reading for this discussion, the but yeah, I thought that conversation was wonderful. Like I highlighted that bit because it brought out the exact same point that we are all, we change, we reincarnate, and the parents reincarnate too. At that point, like how are we related to each
Great.
other, and
Mm-hmm.
what does that even mean? And in that connection, there's also this thing. I think Sam and Kali are having this conversation, and Kali asks him, "Do you love me?" And he says, "The man I used to be loved you then."
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
that feels like a gimmick at the moment to like feel mysterious on Sam's part, but that is a pretty profound statement in the context of reincarnation, like who I used to be. If you think about the Hindu mythology, or maybe other religions too now, like with Buddhism and so on, I am not a religious Hindu. Like I don't practice Hinduism, but I do vaguely believe in reincarnation. So this idea that the like 10 lives ago, whoever this person loved, that wasn't me. And if that person comes back and says, um, "Oh, do you love me?" That's probably not the answer I'm going to give. Except these guys have the memory of their previous
Mm-hmm.
consciousnesses, right? Which, how does that change if you could remember everything? And yeah, how does that change you as a person? I think that is a very interesting
Mm.
question.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
within that same conversation, Callie offers, when he says no, and she offers him a virginal body and asks him if
Mm,
that would make a difference from it. So again, this idea that this deity god, our powers, are also tempted by flesh, you know,
mm,
and much the same ways. And actually, the there is no difference between the gods and man. You know,
mm,
a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times happens a lot throughout the throughout the books.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, especially if they're actually just people with extreme
Yeah, indeed.
technological power,
Yeah.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not, but they're not really gods. That I think that
Right.
is actually the point, and that's where Sam comes to, is like we aren't any different from these
Mm.
people that we're sort of suppressing in a lot of ways, and we need to
Mm-hmm.
move on past them.
So I don't know if Zelazny intended to make this commentary, but in this version of the story, the gods aren't gods. They are just people who are playing at being
Mhm.
gods. But if you
Mm-hmm.
look at all the mythological stories, Hinduism, and also I think the others, gods behave exactly like people. So, like, whatever you find silly about these, whatever
Mm-hmm.
you're able to find as silly, because these are people playing at gods, I think if you take out that bit, it stays silly. Like the stories from mythology that he pulled from that are
Mm-hmm.
funny or yeah, I think that's interesting that you could also readjust how you think of the mythological stories and maybe look at it with
Mhm.
slightly less reverence or pay less mind to it too.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, what was genius about this book, like for example, Greek mythology, the gods are like humans because they were created by the imagination of humans. So they have, it's not the gods that created us. We created the gods. So they are as how the ancient Greeks imagined themselves if they had all these powers. You know,
mm,
and this is kind of the same. Modern man, or what would we humans do with all these powers and then
mm,
become gods? It would just be flawed.
mhm,
It's the whole thing about mythology, this exercise of what would you do with unlimited power, with unlimited technology, with
Yeah.
unlimited lives, with all
yeah.
the time in the world. um, Bottom line, would I think, yeah, that's why we just spend the whole eternity arguing and making deals, and
Mhm.
Yeah.
because it's our nature.
Or
Yeah.
gambling with demons.
There were quite a few
Yeah.
scenes in here where I was like, oh, that's like out of a superhero movie, you know?
Exactly.
Mhm.
They,
Superheroes are modern day, yeah, our
they're,
version of
you know,
gods.
of gods, yeah, and they're like, Sam's trapping one guy in the mud or the earth or whatever as he gets away, and it's like, yeah, I could see that in a movie,
Mm,
in a
Hmm.
modern day superhero movie.
I mean, the thing between Superman and the Fortress of Solitude and Terrence Stamp's character, I can't remember his bloody name, is pretty much out of this book as well. You know, that kind of like transfer of power, etc. Uh, one of the uh, one of the other things made me laugh a lot. The Celestial City in Heaven, which is obscured from modern people seeing all the rest of it. They let the people name the rooms different things. So like heartbreaking was a room which is where they go to discuss and break up and stuff, and
That was
despair is where they
Very
go
organized.
to. Uh,
that was
and
great.
there was one scene where they were like, and they went from heartbreak to despair.
despair.
Yeah,
That's
I
right.
know.
Where they get
It's
there and where they
brilliant.
go to have their final act of love before they get judged and stuff. Right? Okay.
Yeah.
So break up sex. Right? Okay. I get it. Nice.
Oh, it's hilarious.
Oh,
Yeah,
so
There's
funny.
so many
Interesting.
layers. So many. It's so clever.
yeah. New topic. There were some descriptions of like I think Zelazny must have gone to India and written observed things to write about these.
Mhm.
The description of the Kathakali dance. I was curious what you guys thought of that. If any of you looked it up or uh
I
no.
did.
I haven't yet. I was
Yeah.
completely lost there. Yeah.
Tell us, Varsha.
That no, that was really brilliantly done. How he described the whole thing. I have never seen a performance myself, but I want to show you what this looks like and how apt his description was. Can I? Yeah, did that work? See, so
Ah,
the green, they have this
yeah.
huge billowing
Okay.
skirts
Yeah.
and the green face mask, and I think they are able to move individual facial muscles. They're trained from very young, like he said, and they can the most common one that I'm familiar with is like they can raise one eyebrow at a time separately, and
I
they
can't do that.
can
Jared can do that.
and they can like move the mouth and they all mean something and with the hand gestures, and this is something that I really love. The Indian classical dances, they're used to tell stories, so there's different postures that depict the different gods, and the the state where I am from, it's the main classical dance is Bharatnatyam. This is Kathakali, and I thought he did that wonderfully. What the temple looks like, and the the whole festively uh,
Yeah.
feeling in front of the temple where they sell flowers and so on. What the temple itself looks like, the wedding procession of like Kali and Yama's wedding. It almost felt like that was just there so he could write about the wedding procession, honestly. Like, but yeah, I thought all of those were like really beautifully done. The descriptions were beautiful in and of themselves, but also I could see the picture forming of like, that I know that place.
Yeah.
And it definitely prompts the idea that if and when I do a reread of this, I will go and research actually Hindu mythology in a bit more sense. A lot of the traditions that are in there, because I do think there are more layers and more detail in there that again I was missing from even what was quite a deep read of
Yeah,
at this stage. There was so much more to get out of it.
yeah,
Yeah.
especially with the
Definitely.
quotes and stuff. That
Yeah,
you want to see where they came from. You want to see, because there's different layers going on there.
Mm.
Well, I've been looking for a reason to start learning in the mythology, so there it is.
nice. Yeah.
And to top it all off with all the subtlety and subtext we get in here, and all the layers and the humor, it's just really nice prose to read as well. Like you
Yeah.
said,
Mhm.
like Vasha said, the descriptions and stuff like that. And so I really start to see why some of our modern authors are quoting this guy. And like this one has this book has a Gaiman, Neil Gaiman quote on it. You guys mentioned Martin quote, and so you're
Mhm.
starting to see why everybody's looked at
Mhm.
his writing as as an influence, and as a something to hold up as a classic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I can imagine being quite revolutionary at the time, because I'm sure someone mixed mythology with science fiction before, like probably, but to write a science fiction book almost as if it was a fantasy book, it's not quite science fantasy. It's
No.
the prose itself is it's closer to what you would find in a fantasy book
Okay.
than sci-fi, and it just changes everything. And then you add mythology, which is fantasy to the mix, and it's just, yeah, genius.
Yeah.
I really wish I
Uh,
read it sooner.
and there's no doubt about it. Obviously, we're reading The Wars of Light and Shadow. I think I said this to somebody beforehand. There is quite a sense of a strong influence on Johnny's work, Johnny Work's work there throughout this book, even in terms of light being Lord of Light being one of the main concepts of it, the technology disaster that's happened in the past, a lot of that stuff,
Mm.
and then the elevated prose that's in here that it reads sort of beautifully a lot of the way through it, and then you get your moments of dialogue, etc., as you do in Johnny's. Like that's I think it's a clear inspiration in a lot of ways, and what a good template if you're going to do use one, or
Mhm.
as the source for ideas and generation.
Sure. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yep.
And is this what the seventh book we read? Eighth.
Seventh book.
7th.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yes.
so I'm gonna put this at number one
Yes.
Ooh,
over all the
great,
other
great.
ones we've read so far.
It's
Nice.
Yep.
definitely one or two for me.
It's my favorite.
Yeah, yeah. I
It's
meant to
great.
do this week, but I had way too much to read. But for next time, I'll make us a tier list template so that we can keep it up to date each month.
Yeah.
Oh,
Um, that'll
upping
be
the
fun.
stakes. All right.
It, it is interesting to compare because they're not like for like. I think that's one of the things that I
No.
sort of come away from,
Yeah.
is that I thought that would sort of all be, because they're within about 15-year period of each other, they sort of be comparable in some ways, and they're really not. We're getting a lot of
Nah.
very
Mhm.
different styles of book here,
Yeah.
which is great, which is really,
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm,
There's
absolutely
a lot of
fantastic.
apples or apples, oranges, and cherries and bananas in here. So
Indeed. Yeah. Which is the
Mhm.
banana. Don't need to say it this week. We've got through the whole chat without mentioning the banana.
that's right. That's it. Yeah.
what's up with the bananas?
Uh,
The apes.
Is
Yeah.
that a comic book reference?
I think that was tack.
Well,
Tack had it in there, right?
it works on double level
Oh,
because tack is the ape throughout it, but it also, if you were talking in terms of our 7 books we've read, there is a banana skin in the 7 reads that we've done so far, in terms of the one you might slip up and never read another book again after because you couldn't finish it.
no marks for guessing
No,
which
I'm not
book
even going to
is.
mention it.
Yeah.
No.
Interestingly, like we're talking order of like tens of views here. Okay, so like this, we can't read too much into it. But Series in Flight Part 1 discussion has the most views in my SF Masterworks playlist. 73 versus an average of like 30, 40. Like that's really too small a sample size to read anything into it, but
I was going to say, are you proposing a reread, Portia?
no,
No.
no.
I already,
Maybe people were just curious. What would I have to talk about? Maybe they're just
Part one.
I already threw mine in the
One,
fireplace.
yeah, maybe that was it. What do you
Oh
think?
my
The only
God.
reason that book is still on my shelf is so I can have a complete collection.
Actually, I'm the same.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I
But
actually,
yeah,
I moved it to the guest wing. The house is divided our place, and so it's for the guests.
Don't like your guess, Susan.
Whenever it's stuff we don't like, games or books, it goes to the guests.
but without doubt, in terms of sci-fi reads, this is a stone cold classic. Regardless of whether it's 1, 2, or wherever you're going to place it, it is right up there in terms of like brilliant
Yeah.
reads
Yep.
that we've had. And I just knew, as much as I enjoyed reading it the first time, I knew by the time we had this conversation, I would come away just loving it even more because by the different viewpoints that everybody would bring. And it's so true. Every time we go to do this, it's so much fun, guys.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very fun conversation. My cheeks
Is
are...
it the first book that we've all liked, though?
Yeah, I think so.
Universally?
We are all kind of in
Yeah.
agreement. Yeah.
Maybe.
I
Yeah.
think so.
Yeah.
What was I forget, Susanna, did you like the Forever War? Because I think that's the other one that was universal.
Yes, I did. I did enjoy the
Okay.
Forever War.
Jared
I
was mixed on it at the start and then grew to like it, I
Oh,
think,
right.
later
Yeah.
on. Isn't that
No,
right? Yeah.
Yeah. After talking it out, I was like, okay, yeah, I actually do like this
Yeah.
a lot
Mm.
more than I mean, I didn't dislike it. I liked it
Yeah.
to start with, but I had some concerns, and then after talking it out,
Yeah.
that's what we do this for. We
That's
talk
the fun.
about,
Mm.
Yeah.
you know.
Mhm.
Cool.
I Am Legend also was I mean, I wasn't raving about it, but I liked it, and I think
Oh,
everyone else had a decent opinion of it too, if I remember
I
correctly.
liked it.
yeah.
Yeah.
I Am Legend.
Hmm.
It's
So the first two, and then this. But also, in terms of being unanimous, Cities in Flight, nobody liked. So we had the same opinion about 4 books out of 7.
yeah, fair
Yeah.
enough. Yeah.
Well, to be
Yeah.
fair, Varsha, you've only finished 5 of the 7 books anyway, so it's all right.
Oh.
6! I finished 6.
Oh, you finished Cities of Flight. Me didn't finish Cities of Flight totally. I skipped the second part of book 3. Part 3.
So we're even.
You were even then, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I only I DNF too as well. So
Oh yeah.
Mm,
Oh, I think that's going to happen quite a lot, especially as some of these books get slightly longer.
Mm.
It's fine for me. I'll sort of push through a 200 each page book, regardless of what's happening to the end. Once it goes to 300, I'm like,
yeah.
might have to
This
take
one
that
was just on the edge of that. Normally, and I think that I knew this going in, but I still did plan poorly. Most of the SF Masterworks books are 200 pages long, so even if I give myself just 3 days to read them, I can finish them. But this one's 300 pages long, and I still started too late, so I didn't make it to the last chapter. Yeah, I think overall this I agree, this goes up there. Maybe, yeah, I think it beats out the Forever War for me, which is saying something that's been sort of high on the list and unbeatable so far. But I love I think the difference maybe is the Forever War really expands on one theme, and
Mm.
about this book we talked about how using very subtle scenes and little bits of dialogue, it does so much. Like I have 3 pages of notes, and each one is about, oh, like this could be its own theme that we talk about. And like there's one about justice over forgiveness on 104. So this is another thing like that SF books do, or well written ones, that the characters say things that I don't always agree with, but they make me think. And like, if I don't agree with it, I have to sit back and think about, okay, what about it is, it's not immediately obvious to me. I'm like, okay, what about it is jarring to me, right? Like the thing about the case against accelerationism, for instance. Like, you're making sense, but I don't like what you're saying, so I have to think and like really break out what it is I disagree with.
I should encourage you to read some of the Reddit threads on accelerationism. It
Oh,
is
really? Yeah.
bloody hilarious. The fights,
Yeah.
the amount of people that state a point and says this person has obviously never read any of the texts on accelerationism. Please ignore. It's like, well, okay.
Are there texts on acceleration?
Apparently so. And he says, well, I'm actually talking about strand 1 of accelerationism out of the 4 that are available. No
Wow.
clue whatsoever.
It's interesting that accelerationism is a thing in our world because, by definition, this is about a more advanced group giving technology to a less advanced group, and whether it's almost like the um, is it cultural relativism argument? Like, do you change a culture and or let it evolve on its own? It's almost like that, except like a very twisted form of it. But yeah,
It's very much about the idea of prioritizing automation over basically anything else. You know, the fact that
mm,
and in doing so, you will accelerate. It's almost like the existing system or whatever you're proposing to do that to will sort of eat itself, and that
mm,
it won't be able to stop itself. Once you start automating everything, it'll kind of just do away with it, which is kind of this. Again, I sort of see AI coming into this
Yeah.
at the moment. The capitalist world are so damned to get on the
Yeah.
AI, save money, they're going to eat themselves. It's going to end it.
Oddly enough,
Yeah.
that's what this book kind of has in common with a lot of the sci-fi books we read already, is that the idea that technology will be something that will to be afraid of, like
Yeah.
like
Mhm.
That's true.
androids in Philip Dick's novel.
mm,
It's something that will outgrow and
mm.
get out of control, and that's a common theme of
Yeah.
Yeah.
of a lot of the 60s sci-fi we've been reading here.
Good.
Mhm.
Yeah, I suppose the idea that if you wield technology without understanding the implications of what you're doing, like this with AI, for instance, one opinion that I have very strongly is, why the hell do you need to deploy it to arts? Like, there are so many things that could be improved by the use of AI, but
Oh, I know.
why are there people out there like, oh, you know what, I could do with an AI, I'll make it write books. Like, there are enough books to read. Like, you're
But
just
it's
sorry, go ahead.
to stunt to atrophy human creativity. It's exactly. I sorry, I can't go
No,
there because I get
yes.
very angry. But yeah, with so many applications for AI and it go exactly to the arts, that would just kill our creativity,
Yeah, this
yeah,
this is not a place that is dying
make
for the use
us
of AI.
dumb.
No, it's not. Yeah, you're right.
Like,
It's like, yeah, put it to good use. You know,
yeah, yeah. There are like,
where it needs it. We don't need it.
hmm,
Yeah,
Put it where it
yeah,
needs
and even good use, it would be dangerous because we are only, you know, as smart as up to a certain point. You know, we will never have the computer ability. Like for example, with the chess,
hmm,
because it is a finite thing. There's only so many ways you can play and win. There's loads of ways, but there's only so many ways. And now you have the perfect player, and yeah, we're never going to be
Yeah.
able to beat the machine.
But
Imagine that uh, applied to everything. What
yeah,
is left for us to do? Yeah.
but why put that toward a game? Why
yeah,
not
yeah.
put it towards something? You know.
I
But
lost my camera for a sec. But yeah, so my point there was, we're putting AI to use without fully understanding the implications of how this might change society. It's like it's sort of using it because we can. Here,
yeah,
let me show you how to anyway. And that is dangerous. And I guess in that way I do agree with the what was the opposite of acceleration is deists. Uh, the- that's not a good doctrine either. Like, let the gods decide everything for you. But yeah, I think the book is making a great point there, whether intentionally or not, I don't know. But yeah.
something to think about.
It's giving you something to think about, which is right. Like
Mhm.
the one quote that I had pulled out of it that kind of, again, I wrote it down because I wasn't sure whether you agreed with it. It's kind of exactly what you said, Varsha, in terms of, but I need to pour over it, was, are not worship and religious awe a combination of love and hate, desire and fear? You know, and
Mm,
that kind of thought, I never thought about
Hmm.
it like that. You
Yeah.
know, it said, I think it's by Yama, I think says it within thing, and you're like, right, okay, yeah, maybe so, you know.
mm,
People
Yeah.
feel the need to be loved or be accepted unconditionally by something, whether it's an entity or otherwise. Okay.
mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a combination of human emotion. It's
Yeah.
it's what makes it human. I think it's the point of the book. One of the or that's
Mm,
it doesn't matter how much we evolve, how much that we can evolve the technology to a point of magic, but we are still going to be humans.
Right.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. We can be an ape and still be behaving like a human. We can be a dog and still behaving like a human, because that's our nature.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's another thing that I loved, how this book sort of unashamedly explored there, that this idea that it is a sci-fi novel, right? But the rakashas are just flames of consciousness. I've seen it done in other sci-fi books too, but this idea that the consciousness is separate from the body and it can exist on its own, and the rakasha taught uh, Sam how to do that. I think that's brilliant, and it ties back to the idea of reincarnation and like in the mythology or religion. Um, yeah, that's one bit of Hinduism that I can get
Mhm.
behind. um, but yeah, it's the exploration there in terms of what it means to have the consciousness outside of the body. I think that was really well done, especially by giving us this additional species that exist without a body.
Hmm. Yeah,
So,
so much
yeah.
to explore there. Yeah. Part two.
Yes.
And
Oh,
now he has guilt. Ah.
yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of part two, I guess he didn't write that sequel, of course, but there's this book called Light, what, Creatures of Light and Darkness, in which apparently he's playing with Egyptian mythology.
Oh,
Oh yeah.
can
He
Hmm.
read
also
that.
yeah. He also has a book called Lord Demon, so I'm wondering what that's about.
Oh, yeah.
I
So
don't
I have
know.
enough. I have enough reading. Thanks, Varsha. We're good.
yeah, I don't think that's getting read anytime soon. I feel like for books like this, um, I kind of wish I had started reading this much earlier, because each chapter I would have liked to take a day to read and think about it. But
So good.
maybe I will reread it at some point. But
Yeah.
uh, yeah,
I felt that when we were discussing, you said you were going to do it in 2 3 days. I was like, I'm glad I was able to pour over it, because you do get an awful lot more
yeah,
out of it. I think it
yeah,
is definitely one of those books because of it. And
yeah.
maybe you'll get more to the last chapter, though, having had this discussion and then
Mm,
going to the last chapter. I think that'd be really interesting to
Yeah.
explore.
She
yeah.
might come back and say, "We got to record this all over again."
Yeah. I have thoughts, and you missed them.
Like 15 years from now, we'll do the rereads of our favorites.
Oh,
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 When we get to the end,
I
we'll go
like
back.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a I think Golex is publishing some a subsection of these books. I don't remember what they're calling it,
the
but it's
best of,
the
yeah,
best of. So
when you
we'll do our
coverage.
own
Yeah.
version of that. Long-term plans over
Wow.
long-term plans.
Yeah.
Nice.
we'll see if Cities of Flight's in there.
Hope and
Yeah.
Yeah.
ambition.
Yeah, Jared, that's still a mystery at this point.
I'm sort of very keen to read Case of Conscience, which I think is the next James Blish book that's up. It's
Mhm.
a lot
Yeah,
shorter
yeah.
for a start, and I'm quietly hoping that is great.
Yeah. I'm I am hopeful for that, because there's my favorite bit was the theology discussion in the first book of Cities in Flight. So anyway.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
we have anything else to talk about Lord of Light?
It was
Just go read it.
very enjoyable. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is
Yes.
going to stay on my nightstand. I'm going to reread it sooner rather than later, because I think there's a lot to learn here. Um,
Yeah.
for my own writing and then just for fun. I think there's a lot I missed, and
Yeah.
I want to figure it all out. So yeah.
Oh, yeah. 50 pages in, I went to my Goodreads shelf and marked this as a favorite. I'm like, I don't need this
Oh,
again. I
nice.
love the writing style. I'm like, I love what it's doing. Even just this one chapter is sufficient for me to declare it a favorite. I don't care where it goes from here. Good thing it didn't go the Cities in Flight direction. But anyway,
That
uh,
is true.
let's do outros. Chris, would you like to start us off?
Yes, my name's Chris Mullen, sometimes YouTuber, sometimes appear on other people's channels. Definitely doing part of the Speculative Speculations podcast and also posting a lot on page 2.
Nice. Jared.
And I'm Jared. I run the Fantasy Thinker YouTube channel. I'm also on Speculative Speculations and page chewing forums all the time.
Hmm. You can also find me on the page chewing forums. I spend a lot of time there of late, or on X as Chronodendron, and my YouTube channel, of course, Den of the Weird. And my books are available everywhere. Timelessness first book is Weird Gods, and I have a new standalone novel coming up called Oublié next month. So it's available for pre-order. Check it out.
Cool. And I'm Varsha. You can find me on the YouTube channel Reading by the Rainy Mountain. You can find links to the podcast that Chris and Jared mentioned called Speculative Speculations off on the About page. It's currently only available on Spotify, but I will start posting it on YouTube soon as I make the time to do audio spectrum for them. If you'd like to read along with us, like I said at the beginning, if you'd like to read along with us for these SF Masterworks, either discuss them just on the forum or here in this discussion group, consider joining the Patreon forum. That's where we do all the planning and scheduling. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you in about a month. Bye.
Bye.